What's up guys, I hope you're all well. Welcome back to yet another video, and yes, I am not dead, so I'm finally back. I do apologise, I've taken a few weeks break just because I had an immensely busy October filming stuff. Of course I did Alton Scarefest with my best friend. I also went to Ventura over in Spain, and to top everything off, of course I also went to Thorpe Park Fright Nights to end off the 2025 season. So it was a very busy month, really enjoyed making the content, you know, I'm absolutely proud of it. It was just very tiring, a lot of editing, so I thought I'd go on a little break, but I'm back now, so yeah, all three of you can stop panicking about my absence. So yeah, to kick off close season, I thought I'd make a little bit of a interesting video, I think, you know, and kind of hit it at a different angle that some other people have kind of taken this subject in, and that is of course Project Horizon over at Alton Towers Resort. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is a project that I'll kind of get into the nitty-gritties in just a minute, but this was a project that Alton Towers announced a few years ago, with planning permission of course, and yeah, it's just kind of been flapping about. We don't really know what's going on with it, and yeah, today I'm just going to kind of lay all the evidence out. We're going to have a good discussion about whether it's happening, whether it's not happening, and then I'm going to finish the video off with a few of you guys, is kind of questions and responses to the project over on Instagram, and that I asked for. Follow me on Instagram, park_thrills. Yeah, so it's going to be an exciting video today. I thought I'd get a few of you guys involved in it as well. Like I said, I've got a few answers that I got over on Instagram to go through, so that's going to be really, really fun. So without further ado, I'm going to stop yapping and let's get down to business. Okay then, so to kind of give you guys a little bit of a rundown on what this project actually was, it was essentially a big indoor show building, which is not something we normally see over here in the UK. Of course, the last time I think we saw a kind of show building of this size-ish, it's actually a bit smaller, being built, was of course with Darren Brown's Ghost Train over at Thorpe Park. So this was quite a big announcement when this first happened. It was set to be essentially a indoor attraction of some description. The size of the building and a few other bits and pieces kind of indicated that it would be an indoor coaster, and we'll get onto that in just a second because there's a few things surrounding that make for quite an interesting conversation. So yeah, these plans were revealed to us in early of September 2022, and it was quite an interesting project actually, because you know, you don't normally see a lot of indoor attractions in this you know, kind of industry over here, at least in the UK, and it was quite an interesting prospect, and a lot of people, you know, kind of running wild with their theories on what it could potentially be. And it was a really exciting project, not only because you know, it was an indoor project, but it would have been the biggest show building on Park, which is quite large. You know, you've got the Nemesis Subterra show building, which is a decent size, but you've also of course got the World of David Walliams stuff, and it was going to be even bigger than those. So this was quite a hefty project that Alton Towers wanted to undertake. It also would have been located just behind the World of David Walliams. It was kind of separated by an access path in between that and the dungeons, and it was going to be built on an old storage area that hasn't been used in over 30 years, which is, you know, quite good, I think, personally. You know, we're in this kind of state now where, especially with something like Hyperia getting you know, built, you know, it was in replacement of an old attraction. Same with Wicker Man, that of course replaced the Flume, and like I just mentioned, Hyperia also replaced Logger's Leap over at Thorpe Park. So the prospect of them building on a storage area that's just not used as much now, you know, and kind of, you know, digging in and kind of expanding the park rather than replacing something there was a really good move, I think, and it definitely got me personally really, really excited. Now overall, it was kind of announced that this project would take roughly about 2 years to kind of construct, which is an average time. You know, that's including groundwork and clearance as well. You know, that's something that is to be expected with a building of this nature. And it's actually quite interesting that within these plans that they released in late September, you know, of 2022 and into December of course as well, is that they were actually intending on locating, you know, the ride off Park to be built and then kind of put in, you know, chunky pieces rather than being built inside the building itself. Again, another indicator that this could have easily been a roller coaster, because you can definitely build a roller coaster instead of on supports, you know, on traditional supports. You can build them on like these frameworks that are easily slottable into these show buildings. So I think it probably would have been a roller coaster purely for that fact itself. But yeah, they were extensively planning everything to do with this ride. You know, this kind of came out of nowhere. We got the announcement in late September that they were going to be revealing something, and of course in late 2022 all of this came out, and it was just like a theme park enthusiast's dream just splurged out on paper, because, you know, again, we we don't have a lot of dark rides in this country, and especially Alton Towers, you know, has done dark rides really well. And the fact that it was located within this show building, you know, just adds to that air of mystery about what's actually going to be inside, which I think was a really, you know, interesting time to be an enthusiast. Now, of course, where did this all go wrong? Now, this is kind of where I'm going to do a little bit of a timeline breakdown, because it's not really that extensive of a timeline, because it did get quite far, but there just wasn't a lot of resistance from the councils and stuff, especially not as much as Hyperia had over at Thorpe Park, which adds to that kind of, you know, confusion as to why this hasn't gone ahead yet. But yeah, like I said, late September 2022, we first got the rumours and the, you know, first kind of words being spoken from Alton Towers' mouth about potentially revealing a brand new project. We then move on into November, December 2022, where we of course officially got the plan submitted. These were the plans for the building, the location, and also, like I just mentioned, a few of the different tidbits on how they were going to construct the project. That was all detailed within these plans, revealed in late September and kind of into the end of the 2022 kind of calendar year. And then into one of the quickest turnarounds in a planning phase I think I've ever seen, at least since I've been an enthusiast. Nearly about 4 months later, in February of 2023, the plans were approved. Everything was sorted. Everything was, you know, approved. Big old stamp on the planning documents and stuff. And yeah, after that, it just went radio silent. We heard nothing. The plans had been approved, but nothing was being done, and that was what really confused people about this. And I have a little theory as to why this happened, and I think it's kind of the common consensus now. But yeah, it was definitely a weird thing to have this kind of big grand plan for something and then it just not be touched after everything seemingly has been approved with no issues whatsoever. And that brings us to the final update, or at least the last update we've had in recent years. And that was in December of 2024, where they kind of submitted a woodlands management project, you know, which kind of discussed how they were going to go about building the attraction itself, and that was approved. You know, that was submitted back in February, I'm pretty sure, when the plans were approved. They'd submitted this woodland stuff, and this was approved in December, so it was technically active from about the earliest now into the current timeline, December 2024. That's kind of the last we've heard of this project. So yeah, definitely weird. And you know, with it being over 2 years now since this project has kind of, you know, had any kind of chatter from official sources, it definitely leads a lot of people to think that it is completely dead. However, I'm not that cynical, and we're going to go about trying to pick some pieces apart and see whether or not this is actually dead. Is there a chance it could come back? I'm going to share my thoughts on what I think about the project as a whole, and then, like I said, we're going to get into some of you guys' thoughts as well at the same time. Now, we know not kind of that long after these plans were submitted, there was a lot of cutbacks at Merlin. In fact, we're still kind of getting a few cutbacks as recently as this year, especially with the entertainment force. So this came at a time where Merlin and Alton Towers were kind of on the back foot financially a little bit, and of course we then had the decision that they were going to do Nemesis Reborn. Now, this was of course you know, a cheaper project in comparison to something like Project Horizon, but I do believe it was still kind of planned at the same time. I think that at the time of them submitting the Project Horizon stuff, I think they very much were still intending on doing the Nemesis retheme and the retracking. I think that was still, they're very much on the cards. I think it's then what comes after Nemesis Reborn that really tells a story about what happened here. Now, at this stage in the kind of timeline, you know, the success of Nemesis Reborn was huge, and of course within that kind of time span we got the announcement that they were going to be building the Toxicator, which is of course the brand new flat ride for this year, and it was an absolutely fantastic, was it last year? No, I'm pretty sure it was this year. I get really confused with these timeline stuff over at Towers because I get to ride them about a few months after they've opened, or even up to a year, so my mind is all over the place right now. But yeah, long story short, we got the announcement for the Toxicator, and it kind of became a running theme that Alton Towers were really investing in Forbidden Valley, which a lot of people you know, were happy about. You know, it was very well received. This went as far back as them of course reopening Nemesis Subterra just before Nemesis Reborn opened, so they had been putting a lot of effort into this area specifically, and I think that's where this project kind of started to get in the way of things. But yeah, in terms of what the actual attraction was rumoured to be, we still don't know, and I think that kind of aids to the theory that this could potentially not be dead. And I say dead because it is dead, but it's not necessarily dead in the ground, if that makes sense. You know, it's a very complicated situation. Like I said, planning permission, once it's approved, it lasts for a very long time, so this isn't dead in the water yet. I would consider it to be dead in the water when the planning permission runs out, and that's not necessarily the case at the moment. Okay, so I'm sitting here editing this video right now, and I did get something ever so slightly wrong. The planning permission actually runs out in February of next year. For some reason in my head, I thought planning permission lasted for about 10 years, but in actual fact, it is about 3. So we've still got a little bit of time. The plans are technically still active, however, they do run out in a few months' time, but this doesn't mean that the project's dead, and everything I'm kind of about to say from this point is still very much valid. Of course, plans can be resubmitted, and with the very little resistance that Alton Towers got, you know, in the process of getting these plans granted, I don't think that they would be too worried about resubmitting it. I think where Alton Towers is at the moment, you know, knowing that the plans kind of hardly got a lot of resistance at all, the council were very much fine with it, you know, the public consultation went well, I think they're probably in the safer position. They can kind of sit there and go, right, well, we don't have to rush this out, we can resubmit this stuff, and we know that it's probably gonna, you know, go forward with relative ease. So I don't think it's completely dead in the water. And another thing that kind of fuels this theory of kind of resubmitting these plans at a later date, you know, one of you guys actually talk about this in one of your Instagram questions, is of course a lot of people involved within the project, including John Wardley, you know, wouldn't stop going on about how exciting this project was, and I think Alton Towers wouldn't just discard that and get rid of it at the nearest opportunity. You don't submit plans without the intention of wanting to build it. Whether they can is a very different story, and of course that's something we've discussed in this video, but I do think the fact that a lot of these Alton Towers officials, you know, especially John Wardley being excited about it, you know, I don't think they're just going to abandon this. I think that at least in some capacity it will come back, whether it's in the exact same form as it is now, or whether or not they may change a few things, but I think the core and general idea will stay the same, but it is in a little bit of a purgatory state at the moment. So I'm going to get back to editing. I'm going to let you guys finish watching the video, and yeah, I hope you all enjoy it. There was a lot of speculation potentially about seeing a multi-dimension coaster in there from Intamin, which I think would be really, really cool. I had a chance to ride a ride system like this actually in Salou with the Uncharted ride, and whilst the attraction itself wasn't that great, the ride system itself very much was. I really enjoyed that kind of ride system, and again, in a very big indoor show building, I think it's very much possible that Alton Towers could have been eyeing up something like this. But thinking a little bit more outside of the box, I do think that this could have been SW9. We still don't know. All we kind of officially know this as on all of the planning documents, all the official stuff, is Project Horizon, but a lot of people, including myself, do think that they probably were planning at some point to do a bit of a rug pull just as the construction started. When those walls went up, instead of Project Horizon on the side, it would have said SW9, and I think I'd very much believe that. I think that's definitely kind of where they were heading with this, especially when you consider the time frame, you know, that this was being built in. You know, this was nearly 10 years now, like from the date of kind of where it was still active. It would have been about 10 years after Wicker Man, which is a very, very long amount of time, and any time over a decade, I know for us Thorpe Park fans that's like normal, it took ages for us to get Hyperia, but for Alton Towers that's really rare for them to wait, you know, that long between major coasters. So this definitely kind of fueled the fire for the SW9 theory. You know, I doubt they would have done something so drastically different from SW9 as their next major attraction. So I think that was definitely where the project was headed. Now, of course, this coincides with the fact we're now getting a brand new junior coaster next year at Alton Towers, which of course is exciting. You know, it's themed to, I don't know, what is it themed to? I think it's themed to Bluey. You know, everyone loves Bluey, that's fine. I love a bit of Bluey. But yeah, so that's kind of, I think, been a last minute thing that Alton Towers have done. Again, I think it all stemmed from financial stuff. I think they would have chose to have done this junior coaster in replacement for this attraction. I think, were the plans still active, and if the planning kind of went ahead and it started construction when it was intended to, when the plans were approved, I think that 2026, 2027 slot wouldn't have been that junior coaster. I think that would have been Secret Weapon 9 Project Horizon. Okay then, so now I've had my turn of putting a tinfoil hat on and kind of rambling about all my theories and my thoughts on, you know, where we're at with Project Horizon. It's time to take a look at what you guys think. Now, I took to Instagram and asked the question, what do you think about, you know, Project Horizon as a whole? You know, do you think it's dead, alive? You know, it literally could be anything. And I got a couple of replies, so let's go through what some of these people have been saying. So the first one we've got here is from the UK theme park guy, who responded by saying, I feel like due to the cutbacks at Merlin, it's been cancelled or severely delayed, which is sad. had. Again, this is something I discussed just a minute ago. I do think the cutbacks have really affected Alton Towers specifically. I think it's going to be a very rough couple of years to kind of try and find their feet again, and I think, you know, the smaller attractions that they've been, you know, producing and releasing and opening, I think will definitely help that. So I'm really excited to see kind of where they're going to be at once this junior coaster in 2026 has been built. The next response we got was from Noah 26206, which says, initially promising but safe to say it's dead. Could have been the SW John tease. Now, again, this is a lot of, you know, the perspective from a lot of people. A lot of people do think that this is dead in the water now, and I certainly am kind of among a lot of those people, but I do like to stay a tiny little bit optimistic with some of this stuff. You know, but yeah, that could definitely well have been the case. Of course, the secret weapon John teased, you know, for those of you that don't know, was something that John Wardley, of course, the creator of the original Nemesis and a lot of the big coasters over at Alton Towers, kind of did a Q&A. I'll try and insert the clip here. Did a Q&A for an event last year or a year before, and he mentioned that the most exciting thing he knew about in the UK and just the wider theme park industry itself was coming to Alton Towers, and I don't necessarily think that was anything to do with Toxicator or this Bluey roller coaster. You know, not throwing any shade at Bluey, but you know, I don't think that's what John was on about, and I think that project would have been Secret Weapon 9 and what would have been housed in that massive show building.
In the past 20 years, things have obviously progressed beyond what you could have foreseen back then, with Chessington's new coaster being a prime example of that. So is there anything new that's come along that's particularly impressed or even surprised you?
It is coming along here. So Alton Towers will be announcing in due course what their plans are for the future. It's taken a little while for this to happen, but all the stuff that has been run past me over the last 6 months, I've been really excited by, very, very excited by, and that hasn't necessarily been the case many years back. All I will say is that you don't need to wait too much longer for some fairly exciting announcements that are going to be made.
Now, that's kind of all the responses we had there, but that's not the end of the discussion. I want you guys to go down in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on Project Horizon. What do you think, you know, is going to happen with it? Do you think it's dead? I'd love to know. Do you think it's alive? What are your kind of thoughts on the project as a whole? You know, let's have a bit of a discussion down in the comments below, and just kind of, yeah, shoot whatever kind of theories we have, because I think it's an interesting topic to talk about. And while it's still kind of in this purgatory phase where we don't necessarily know whether the plans have been scrapped or not, you know, and the planning permission is still granted, it's that interesting kind of period of time where we don't really know what's going on. So now is the time to kind of let the theories run wild, so I'd love to hear what you guys think as well. So that is going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you all did enjoy it. Of course, if you did enjoy it, make sure to like and subscribe. You know, I've got plenty of closed season content coming up that I'm really excited to film, and yeah, I'm really optimistic about the future of the channel. You know, I've absolutely loved every minute of this, and I did say this and I did get all soppy in the Fright Nights video that I released a few weeks ago, but I do genuinely appreciate everyone that kind of follows the channel or even just interacts with me on Instagram. You know, I've had a few lovely messages, I've had some great conversations with people, you know, and that's what made me fall in love with the theme park community in general. You know, there's so much to talk about and so many loved people to talk about it with. So yeah, I thank you guys so much for that. And yeah, without further ado, that's going to be me done for today. I'm going to let you guys get on with the rest of your day, and I will see you guys hopefully in the next video.